With a bad haircut.
Yeah, that's probably good over there, though. You know how those styles are. But
well, if it's the style he wears, it's the good one.
Yeah, right. He kind of establishes the tone for everything over there. And you know, I watched a documentary on North Korea. I think it was a 2020 expose. They got a journalist, an Asian gal, into North Korea to kind of mingle with the people, and they hidden cameras, and they went in under the auspices of a eye doctor. There was an eye doctor performing cataract surgery on people, and this eye doctor was from one of the European countries.
Is that because there are no eye doctors in North Korea?
Yeah, there are a lot of people that have blindness from cataracts because there's no health, there's no health care. But so anyhow, they got in with this team of eye doctors, and they were going to do 100 cataract surgeries a day, and be there for 10 days. So they had committed to the North Korean government to cure 1,000 people of blindness through this surgery. So after the first day, they've got all the people, the 100 people in this room, looks kind of like a church almost, and they're all kind of sitting in their seats, and they all have patches on their eyes. Some have two, because they have double cataracts, some have just one, different things. And they had to keep the patch on their eye for 24 hours. So after that 24-hour period, they're all in this room, and they take the patches off one at a time. And the first person is like a double cataracts person. They've been totally blind for who knows how many years. They take the patches off this guy's eyes.
And he can see.
And he can see. And he rushes to the front of the room to the portrait of Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il. He bows down on his knees. He begins to weep and cry. He puts his hands up in the air, and he thanks the supreme ruler for this healing to his eyes. And every single person in that room did exactly the same thing. Now, some were more passionate than others about it, but everyone exhibited a tremendous amount of worshipful passion to the pictures of Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un. And all that reminded me of was like a very enthusiastic Pentecostal worship service where someone was charismatically worshiping the Lord Jesus. I mean, I was in awe at the idolatry, that these guys, these people would worship their leaders like that. Now, that's kind of what communism teaches. You worship the state, you don't worship the Lord. But I found it amazing that the very reason they're blind is the very person they're worshiping.
Yeah, they're blind because he denies health care to everybody.
Yeah, because he's a if you ever look at the satellite map of the Korean Peninsula at night, you can look down from space and you can see the demilitarized zone, and then everything south of the DMZ is just lit up like a regular country in the world.
Because it is a regular country in the world.
Yeah, there are cities and cars and all kinds of activity, and just everything going on at night. You go to the north of the DMZ and you've got 3 lights, and they're all Kim Jong-un's palaces. Boom, boom, boom. That's the only place in the country that has electricity at night, So this, I want to say it was Lucy Liu or Ling or something like that. I hate that I can't remember her name, but she was in a home of a North Korean home, and the one man was getting ready to have the cataract surgery, and so they were staying with them, and they were all talking about how wonderful the leader was, the supreme ruler of the universe, Kim Jong-un. They really pour on the verbal accolades, and then she lets it slip, She's like, well, what if he's not so great? Or something. She said something to that. She said something.
She could die in North Korea.
She said something to that effect, And I mean, it was like you could hear a pin drop. Everyone just, they turned their heads. They're staring at her. What did you say? Oh, nothing. She realized she crossed the line, because in America, we just land blast verbally our leaders.
Yeah.
We don't have any. Because we've embraced this culture of free speech, and I'm not always saying it's the right thing to say or appropriate, but we've got the freedom to say it, and so for her to step into this multiple generations of leader worship, it was really strange to her. And I want to say one other thing too. There was an older man that was a Korean man that received double cataract surgery and received sight to both eyes. Immediately after receiving his sight and doing the bow down to the pictures, throw your hands up in the air and cry and worship the supreme ruler thing, he started to declare how he was going to shoot Americans now that he could see again.
Wow. And it was Americans that gave him sight.
Some of them. I think it was a European group. That
okay.
Yeah, the North, the United States. I don't think they were represented there, other than this Asian gal who probably didn't let them know she was from the United States.
Yeah.
But it was an amazing peek into the mindset of the average North Korean citizen. They are totally brainwashed for generations. And I really think, like you said earlier, if you ever dissent against anything in North Korea, there are people that are spies.
Yeah. Oh, well, everybody is.
And they'll tell on them. They'll tell on you.
And they not only kill you, they kill your whole family.
Yeah, and they'll come after you. I know, too, if you're North Korean and you escape, your whole family's gone.
Yeah.
They'll kill everybody in your family. And everybody knows it.
Yeah. And if you do some offense that's not worthy of death in their eyes, you may go to prison for 3 generations.
Man. Yeah.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, it's really, the world out there is amazing. Kevin Qualls over at Southside, I think it was Coach Qualls, showed a video to the students in his class that my son showed me. It was on YouTube. And what it was a North Korean propaganda video showing North Korean citizens how bad it is in the United States. And they showed a guy, a homeless man, wrapped up in a blanket in the wintertime on a bench, somewhere. And this was the average American,
That's what they're saying.
That's the way they spun it,
Yeah.
Oh, this is the way Americans live. Look how horrible it is. And then the camera...
At least we can afford a park bench, right?
Yeah, right. The camera pans up to the tree next to the homeless man, and the commentator says, "Notice the tree, there are no birds." Implying that the people were killing the birds for food. That's what we were eating, were wild birds out of the tree. Now, during the Depression, I think folks did eat some wild birds, but most people probably aren't eating wild birds out of trees, especially in cities. Anyway, then the famous line that really stood out to me was, Americans are so poor they must use snow to make their coffee. They must melt their own snow to make it. They said that 3 or 4 times, like that must be taboo in North Korea. That must mean the lowest of the low.
North Korea gets snow. It gets cold in North Korea.
Yeah, I had an acquaintance that was a soldier in North Korea during the North Korean War, and he talked about how cold it was.
Yeah, they called them. They were known as the Frozen Chosen.
Yeah.
The soldiers that fought there, because it's cold in North Korea.
Right.
Well, I guess all of Korea gets pretty cold, but North Korea is really cold.
I've heard that term applied to certain churches.
The Frozen Chosen.
Gosh. I don't know the names of the churches. I'm just saying I've heard people use that term.
But Voice of the Martyrs.
Right.
You've heard of them?
Sure.
They say, and we talk a lot about Islam.
Yeah.
But they say the most oppressive regime in the world is North Korea.
Yeah, I believe it.
And what's so ironic is South Korea. South Korea is prospering.
It's probably the most Christian nation on planet Earth.
It is. It has the highest percentage of Christians in the world. And they're, as far as I can tell from what I've studied, they're dedicated Christians.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, there's a church called the Yoido Full Gospel Fellowship in South Korea. It's in Seoul. Mm-hmm. It's within artillery range of North Korea, actually.
Oh, gosh.
And this Yoido Full Gospel Fellowship is pastored by a guy named Youngji Cho, who he's a fascinating guy. He actually, the statistics say that that's the largest church in the world.
Okay.
And it's an Assemblies of God church. Their attendance is between 700,000 and 1 million members.
Oh my.
And they start off, everything they do is blanketed in prayer. And it's such a prevalent prayer church. Prayer is such an integral part of that ministry. When people arrive, I forgot how many services they have on a Sunday, like 11 or 12 services. But anyway, when people arrive, they immediately just know to start praying. And they're fervently praying to the Lord. They've got I think it's a mountain they call Prayer Mountain. You got to get away place for prayer. Everything they do is just prayer, prayer, prayer. And it's so prevalent that when the minister comes up to speak, they have to ring a bell. Ding, ding, ding.
To get everybody
Stop
quiet.
Praying, stop praying, yes. And it's funny, just the contrast that, I've heard it said that the church in America will do anything except pray.
Yeah.
And so, but you see, in David Youngji Cho, he has this, and some people are critical of him because of his Eastern background. He has a world and life view that comes from the Far East. So some of his ideas may have a Far Eastern filter to them. So sometimes Westerners are like, well, that ain't God, that's not the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things he's had over the years is a vision for things to manifest in the earth. I'll give you an example. When he first started in ministry, he had a small group he was responsible for. And he was studying on the floor in his apartment. And he started to desire a desk so he could study. And so he began to see a desk in his mind. He began to believe for a desk. And he began to decree, Lord, I thank you for this desk that you're sending me. And you're gonna do this, and I'm expecting you, I'm believing for you to bring me a desk. And lo and behold, he gets a desk. So then the next thing was a bicycle. And he started to sense it and describe it. He called it, he was pregnant with the bicycle. He said that the seed of the bicycle was on the inside of me, and I knew, and I might not be saying this exactly the way he writes it in his book, but I think the name of the book's The Fourth Dimension, something like that, which is a title that flips out Christians. Like, oh, fourth dimension, what's that?
Yeah.
But anyway, he talks about having this bicycle, being pregnant with a bicycle. And he began to believe for a bicycle. He began to think about the bicycle. He began to focus on this thing that he thought was God's will for him to have so he could better serve God's people. He wasn't wanting to ride a bicycle so he could, for recreation. He was
He needed transportation.
Yeah, he needed to get to the people of God, to do the work that God had prepared for him to do.
He wasn't asking for a car, was he?
No. And he let it slip one day that he was pregnant with a bicycle, and oh man, he said the people really teased him about it. Oh, our pastor, he's crazy, he's pregnant with a bicycle, but guess what?
He got a bicycle.
Yeah, then he became pregnant with this, and became pregnant with that, and then ultimately he ended up being pregnant with the church. Yeah. He started to see buildings and different things in his heart, and he began to believe for these things to manifest. And man, they all manifested. Yeah. So the lessons there, he does. I don't know how active he is in the church now. I know he's getting a little older every day, but to pastor the largest church on planet Earth.
So this is a guy in his 70s or 80s?
I don't know if he's that old. I know that I forgot the numbers. The staff, he had like 4,000 pastors on staff. So that's just crazy. I was in Bellevue Baptist over in Memphis, and I was walking around in that church, and I was like, man, this place is pretty big. And they're like, yeah, our monthly utility bill is like $140,000 a month. I was like, oh my, that is amazing. It was like, I forgot how many acres under roof.
Yeah.
It is crazy how big some of these ministries get, and I celebrate that. I'm not against it. I think it's cool, but Pastor Cho, he is like you said, he's ironically just across the border, the largest church in the world. And these, like you said, these Christians aren't just nominal Christians. They are fervent lovers of Jesus Christ. They are focused on prayer. And right across the border from the goofiest, craziest,
most oppressive
country,
evil
on planet Earth. And like you said, we do kind of hammer on Islam some because of the obvious
because
problems.
they keep doing things.
They keep killing people and hurting people. But when you look at the numbers of deaths from dictators who were secular, I think our numbers are much higher.
Actually, they're not. They're not. There's way more deaths.
Islamic killing.
Yeah, I've looked at that. Islam has killed far, far more people than communism. Now, to be fair to
Pol Pot.
Islam is far greater. Far, far greater.
Wow.
But now, to be fair to Islam, Islam has been murdering people for 1,400 years.
Yeah.
And communism has basically done its deeds in 100 years. So
they've got more time.
They've got more time to kill people. Now,
how about the last 100 years?
Well, in the last 100 years, I would say it's probably clearly more people have been killed by communism than Islam. But right now,
Yeah.
There's a lot more people being killed by Islam than communism.
Yeah.
I mean, that's in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, or maybe even 2 or 3 years. And so Islam has really reared its ugly head, and as perhaps the chief evil in the world today. Whereas at one point, I think we would have considered communism the chief evil in the world. And they're both evil.
What do you think about like the New World Order and the Illuminati and all that, as far as the evil in the world?
Well, they're obviously evil.
Where do they rank in your mind?
Here's what I don't know and I don't understand. And if somebody listening can enlighten me on this. You know, these people want the bankers, that's the Illuminati, the New World Order, are the bankers, the world bankers, and they want to control everything. You know, what control do they have?
Don't you think they're a level over the bankers, though?
Oh, I think they are the bankers.
You think Janet Yellen's in the Illuminati?
I think so. Yeah,
I don't know.
So. But anyway, what is the degree of control that the Illuminati and the bankers, the Trilateral Commission, all these people, what control do they have over communism and Islam? And I don't know the answer to that question. I really do not.
I think it would seem to me that Islam is adamantly opposed to central banking.
Well, now you say that.
Our version of central banking.
Yeah, okay. Because under Islamic law, it's illegal to charge interest on money.
Toward other Muslims, right?
No, well, it's just illegal. Yeah, obviously. Well, you can do anything you want to a non-Muslim.
Yeah.
Okay? But it's illegal to charge interest on money under Islam. Okay? But Islamic banking has been very creative. Okay? Like, and I want to give you an example of this. And you remember the Pharisees. They were very holy religious people. But into the letter of the law, or the loophole of the law, they followed it exactly. But by doing so, they violated the very spirit of the law.
Yeah.
And you know, I've heard people argue that, oh, the Pharisees loved the law of God, which is totally false. They hated the law of God.
They just used it like a lot of our modern legal systems.
Like, yes, absolutely. They used
looking
it
for the loopholes.
Used it to or they'd even invent loopholes. And let me give you one that's in the Scripture.
Yeah.
And if you read the Talmud, the holy book of the Pharisees, you see it's just full of these. But one of them that's used in Scripture is Jesus said, "Your law, or God's command says, honor your father and mother." But you say that if you just say, my property is dedicated to God, you don't have to use it to take care of your father and mother. So you totally set aside
nullify the word of God
nullify the word of God. Absolutely. And Islamic banking's the same way.
Yeah.
Okay? They have several methods they use, but one of the most common is a rent-to-own contract. And in effect, a rent-to-own contract turns out to be no different than a mortgage in making interest payments. I mean, it comes by a different name.
Oh, I see. So they charge interest. They don't charge interest.
They charge rent.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of like it's like our property taxes.
Right.
Oh, there's private property ownership. In
but you got to rent your land from the government.
From the state.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, Islamic banking is that way. I mean, they don't call it interest, but in effect, in truth, it really is.
Yeah, it's the same net effect.
Now, you know, you look at rent-to-own contracts in the United States, they're a lot more oppressive than most mortgages and interest.
Have you ever, I know you've got a background in law and you're a lawyer, have you ever broke down the word mortgage?
Well, I know you've mentioned it before, and it means, well, it talks about death, or a death grip.
Mortal, The mort is the prefix for death, like mortality, and then gauge is to grip. So the word mortgage, if you break it down, it literally means death grip.
Yeah. You know, and I want to say something about this. You know, we're talking about the Pharisees.
The Illuminati like to hide in plain sight, don't they?
Yeah. But we talk about all this evil, you know, and the Illuminati and the Muslims and communism and the Pharisees. And really, it's all the same thing. It's that people want to disregard God's commands for their own greedy ends.
Yeah.
That's really what it's all about.
And it's the law, you know, the sacred law of love is to love your enemy and to love others the way you would treat yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's the when
Actually,
you violate that law.
yeah, but you got to
that's where
remember,
you oppress.
above that law is the first of all commandments. And
Love the Lord your God.
Yeah, love God. And, you know, didn't Jesus once say, you know, you say you love God who you can't see.
Right.
How can you love God that you can't see
When you hate your brother.
hate your brother?
Yeah. He says you're a liar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's where many of us are. You know, I think we all have to even fight that temptation. You know, when people have done bad things to us, we tend to want to hate them.
Yeah.
You know, and we got to overcome that with the love of Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. Those greatest commandments, you know, it's vertical love toward God, horizontal love toward man. And Jesus said the first commandment's like the second. So a lot of times we want to separate those things and say, "Oh, I love God, but man, my fellow man, ooh, I don't know about him."
Yeah.
You know, you can trust the Lord, but man's always going to let you down.
Well, you know, there's some truth in that.
Yeah, man's a dog. There is some truth in it, but I don't think we're allowed to just walk with one eye open. You know.
Well, we're commanded to love our enemies.
Yeah, right.
You know, and you know, I talk about Islam a lot. You know, and about the horrible things they do.
Yeah.
But we've got to love those people.
Yeah.
Now, that I don't think that means to totally surrender to their oppression.
Yeah, I don't either.
I think we have to stand against that oppression.
I do
And,
too.
you know, history shows the only way Islam has ever been effectively resisted is with military power. And we have to resist Islam with military power. Otherwise, Islam will overrun everything. You know, I think it was you that told me that Hitler mourned the fact that the German people were not Muslim.
Yes, that's right.
Because if they had had that mindset and that thought process, he said, we'd rule the world.
Yeah, I think I'm going to misquote it, but it had to do with if Christianity was just too weak.
Yeah.
You know, if we'd have been Muslims, we'd have done it. We could have won this thing.
Yeah.
You know? I tell you another thing that I thought was interesting was there was a movement in some of the schools in Russia, in some of the rural areas, to outlaw the hijab. If I'm saying that right.
The black
female,
veil and
the
everything.
female headdress.
Is that how that's pronounced?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Hijab, something like that.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting that where they found the hijab, they also found these other negative social issues, so that they could stamp that out, which was a visible thing. The mindset was it would address the other things, and I found that to be interesting. And you know, some of the Islamic comments were, well, they didn't accept God 20 years ago, but now they do, and they're going to change on this too.
Yeah.
You know, they'll change. But here's the thing, I think, you know, and I think it's Brigitte Gabriel that's been probably the most outspoken person in public about this issue of political correctness and religious tolerance. You know, I'm a Christian, and I get fundamentalism, I understand it, you know. To me, and this might not be the perfect...
Because you are a fundamentalist Christian.
Well, I'm going to define fundamentalism for our listeners, and it might not be the perfect definition, but to me, a fundamentalist Christian believes that if I have a feeling or an idea that's different than the Bible, I have a responsibility to submit my thoughts and feelings and take on what the Bible says about the subject.
Absolutely.
To me, that's fundamentalism.
I think that's a fundamentalist Muslim too.
Except it's not the Bible. It's
No,
the
yeah,
Quran.
it's the Quran.
So if we define fundamentalism in that way, I understand fundamentalism. So to me, our problem with the Islamic world is not radical Muslims who have perverted the Quran into something it never was intended to be, but it is fundamentalistic Muslims that read the Quran and see their leader, Muhammad, raiding the caravan. And they go, oh, you mean I'm supposed to raid a caravan?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll just hijack a ship. I'll become a Somali pirate.
Yeah.
And
I'll
follow what
they are
Muhammad did.
accurately following the teachings
Yeah, they
and practices.
haven't hijacked it. And that's the thing that people don't understand. They have not hijacked Islam. The people who have hijacked Islam are the peaceful Muslims.
Yeah.
Because Muhammad was not a man of peace.
No.
And
Never.
from history and from what the Quran says, Muhammad was a warrior. And I would even go so far to describe him as a warlord. You know, he went out, he conquered nations. They oh gosh, I don't even want to talk about it.
Well,
I mean, it was horrible what he did.
Islamic writings are clear. You know, we speak of Muhammad as a rapist, okay, because he raped thousands of women.
Now, when you say he raped them, didn't he perform some kind of Islamic short-term marriage ceremony first?
No. Actually, the Islamic writings and teachings are clear that Muhammad had sexual relations with conquered women by virtue of the fact that they were his property. You know, that's what justifies it.
Yeah.
They are his property. He can do with them as he wills. And, you know, the evil in that is just, it's incredible.
And, you know, people wonder, you know, well, why do Muslims cut people's heads off, you know?
Well, because Muhammad cut people's heads off.
Yeah.
And he commanded his followers for all time to do that. They have to recite that Allah is God and Muhammad his prophet, or they get their head cut off. And that's one of the stories I've got up. There were Iraqi children, there were Christian children, I think there were 4 of them that were asked to recite that when they were conquered by ISIS. And they said, no, we've always loved Jesus, and we're going to continue to love and worship Jesus. And they gave them 2 opportunities, which is one more than Muhammad says they're supposed to give them.
Yeah.
So, you know, ISIS isn't even correctly following the teachings of Muhammad. ISIS is more liberal. Yeah, they're more liberal and tolerant than Muhammad was, because he said give 1 opportunity. And they gave these Christian children 2 opportunities to reject Christ and acknowledge Allah and Muhammad as his prophet. They refused, knowing that they would have their heads cut off. And they cut off their heads. I'm talking children.
Yeah. Well, this thing that just happened, what is it, in Pakistan?
Yeah, there was like 135, and I may not have the number exactly right, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood. The Taliban, okay, you know, I got to say this too. You know, we talk about the high moral ground of Islam, how there's, you know, they don't drink alcohol, you know, except
unless they're going to go kill themselves.
Then it's okay. But do you know what the Taliban does for a living? Do you know where they get their revenue? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I want to say it's poppy seeds.
It is. It's heroin.
Yeah.
Okay, they're drug traffickers. These high moral people are drug traffickers.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, they go into this school in Pakistan. Now, the particular school they went into is a school for children of people in the Pakistani army. Now, you got to remember, Pakistan was founded and organized to be an Islamic state. That's what Pakistan is all about. But the Taliban is so evil and so immoral that even the other Muslims,
they're not hardcore enough.
They can't tolerate the Taliban, and the Taliban can't tolerate them. So the Pakistani army is hunting down and killing Taliban. Okay? So the Pakistani army...
Was that before the attack on the school?
Oh, yeah, before.
Oh,
Okay? So the Pakistani army school, this is the children of the people in the Pakistani army, was attacked by the Taliban. And they went into the school. In front of these school children, they set one of the teachers on fire and burned the teacher to death. Now, I don't know if it was a male or a female teacher. The article doesn't say that. And then, after they burned the teacher to death, or burned her alive till she died, I don't know if it was male or female, they beheaded all the children. And then they just went on a shooting spree in the school and just shot as many children as they could shoot. Now, finally, you know, the army gets there. And can you imagine? You're in the army, you're going to the school of your children, and you've got to attack the school of your children. Who knows? How do you know whether your attack will lead to the death of your children? But you can't continue what's going on. And the Taliban they did that to demoralize the army. There is no depth that these people won't stoop to. And why is that?
Do you think it would really demoralize the army?
Oh, if it was me, it would make me all the more adamant to go after the Taliban.
Exactly. It'd have the opposite effect.
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, well, if the gloves were on, they're off now.
Yeah.
You know, you killed people's children like that?
Yeah. There would be no...
Golly.
And then, what we'll probably see next is the atrocities of the Pakistani army against the Taliban.
Yeah.
You know? But really, who can blame them in a sense? You know, you cannot... You know, I know, I'm with love your enemy. But we cannot tolerate this degree of evil. We just, nobody can tolerate that kind of evil. Those people have to be killed.
Yeah, you know, a lot of I've got a friend that's talked to me a little bit about, he calls it the pacifist movement, you know, like pacifism for Christians. And, you know, when you look at the life and ministry of Jesus Christ, you don't ever see him, other than when he overturns the tables of the money changers, you don't ever see him really getting violent, you know, in that fashion. But he does tell his disciples, remember earlier, and I'm going to paraphrase, he said, but remember earlier I told you don't take a sack, don't take shoes, don't take a sword. Now, take a sword.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. People just totally skip over that scripture.
And the
but if you remember, they said, we have, I don't know, one or how many, and they said that, he said that's enough.
Yeah.
You know, he does not want his followers to molest other people militarily.
Right.
Okay?
I agree.
But he says you got to defend yourself. That's basically the concept.
Well, the idea, yeah, the idea of turn the other cheek too, I think, is used to describe, you know, just laying down and being a pacifist. But when you really analyze the statement, the way it's worded, I think it says something about if someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other one also. And when you think about the right cheek, most people are right-handed, so if I'm looking at someone and I'm going to strike them on the right cheek with my right hand, it's not going to be a bludgeoning, crushing punch. It's going to be a backhand. And so it's more of an insult than it is a I'm going to kill you kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I believe like Jackie Robinson was a great example of a guy that could turn the other cheek. Because no one was trying to kill him. They were just yelling at him and being mean and calling him horrible names and all that kind of stuff. And he just took it.
Yeah.
You know, and turn the other cheek. I think that's what that scripture means.
Yeah.
But if someone's standing over you and they're going to crush your head with a rock or something, man, you better move. You know, you better
get
active. Defend yourself.
And I think you have a responsibility to defend your family.
Absolutely.
And that family goes beyond wife and children. It goes to parents, and I think it goes to your whole nation at some point.
Well, think about think about an active shooter deal in a church. You know, there have been churches that have been, because I think most churches are gun-free zones, so the criminals don't ever think about, they never...
Our church is not a gun-free zone.
Yeah. You want to put that on the air, huh?
Well, yeah.
It's in your bylaws. I think that's Arkansas law, right?
I don't... There are guns carried in the church I go to.
Yeah. But, think about it. Everyone's like, oh, no, we could never bring a gun into the church. We want to trust in the Lord to provide and take care of us and make us safe. And I think, well, okay. Well, when you study Romans 13, it talks about the civil authorities don't carry the sword for nothing. And I think in an active shooter environment, you definitely want to have a gun, because you got nothing if you don't have a gun. Mm-hmm. If a crazy person came into your church and started walking into the nursery and just started shooting children, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Well,
I'd be for putting a sign on we don't have it, but on the front of the church, this church is not a gun-free zone. Because if you put the sign on, this church is a gun-free zone, what are you telling anybody?
Any business
that wants to, well, this is a shooting gallery for me.
Yeah, I've actually heard that there are some business, I'm not going to name the businesses, but I can tell you two. One, I'll say it's at Southside. One has been robbed multiple times, and according to the guy that I spoke with, who would know, the owner of that business is adamantly opposed to firearms. I mean, they are totally against it, and they've been robbed multiple times. And then there's another business, now this business is in Batesville, and they make it known that our employees, if they want to, are carrying concealed.
Yeah.
Never been robbed one time.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? While I was campaigning and again, this is the South Side. I happened to go into a place, and it was some kind of a gun works where they modified guns and made gun parts. Yeah, and there were several employees working there. I'm going to say 6. It could have been more than that. Okay, every one of them had a sidearm on.
Yeah.
And you know, when I walked in there, I didn't feel a bit frightened.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm as safe here as anywhere I could be. I really felt safe and secure there.
Think about I know there's a school district that made national news in Arkansas. I mean, my memory, I don't remember the name of the district, but they had a plan to arm their teachers. And there was a training program. I'm sure there was a lot of mental evaluation that went into it. And it was several of the teachers could opt in to become conceal and carry people in the school. And they had training and different things. Everyone's got a pretty passionate opinion about that. My personal opinion is, I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you do? Okay, here's the plan. Get under your desk.
Well, your wife and my wife both work at a school, right? Okay. As a matter of fact, my wife's in a position, I really think she should have a gun. More so even than your wife and what she does.
Yeah, well, I mean, right, the closer you are to the possible entry points, But, I mean, people may think, man, that is crazy. And it is a polarizing subject, I get it. But again, being a pragmatic polarizer, I think about this stuff and I don't mind to talk about it. I really think in our culture, a well-trained, and we've got school resource officers in our schools, which I think is a good idea. But again, it's just one person. You just got one guy, and he can't be everywhere at the same time. And if I were a criminal or a crazed person and I was going to go into a school and try to hurt students, kids, or shoot them, and I knew this school was armed to the teeth with
you're not going there, are you?
9mm pistols or whatever, I'd pick a different school.
Yeah. I get a lot of emails about a lot of subjects, and I find myself, there's 2 subjects that I just have trouble getting enthused in talking about and passing on and whatnot. And those 2 subjects are immigration and guns. And the reason I can't seem to get enthused about them is, if you don't get those 2, if you don't get it that we need to close the border and we need to keep our gun rights, if you don't get those 2, you are just such a moron that I don't need to be talking to you. I mean, those are so obvious that we shouldn't even ever have to discuss those 2.
I don't know why we can't, when it comes to immigration, I don't know why we can't create a system that works.
Well, we got to close the border.
Well, okay, close the border, but then you've got to have a way, if people want to come into our country legally, you've got to make that way work.
Now wait a minute. Let me say this. First of all, immigration laws should be for the benefit of the country. Our immigration laws should be for the benefit of our country.
I agree.
Okay? So who should we allow in? People we need and want.
Need and want. I agree with
Right? Okay, that would exclude drug dealers.
Yep.
Okay? And you can... Do we want low-skilled agricultural laborers? Is that what we want? If that's what we want, that's what our immigration laws should allow in and attract. Do we want...
Where they're not illegal, though.
Right.
It's all legal.
And our system is so inefficient. It's almost like the government has destroyed the legal immigration system. So we can't get the people in that we need or want in a legal way. The only way people come in is illegally. That's just crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy, and I haven't honestly spent hours and hours and hours trying to solve that problem because I'm in no position to actually solve the problem.
Yeah.
It'd be a lesson of futility other than I could talk about it, But it would seem that we should revamp that immigration system. Like you said, let's close down the border. Let's set it up so if you want to come into our country, you walk this path right here. You come into this checkpoint. We ask you a lot of questions. We examine your papers or what do you have to offer our country, and then we give you a thumbs up or go back.
Yeah.
And that's the end of that. And you know, if you illegally come into our country, you know, we take some kind of action.
Here's my solution
it's very detrimental.
for right now to just solve it. Let's just have the United States adopt Mexico's immigration policy. That would solve our problem instantly.
Tell me about Mexico.
Well, there's no toleration whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't allow illegal immigration. Well, look at this Marine that went into Mexico and
made a wrong turn.
Yeah, and he's on the cell phone before he goes in, and he says, "Hey, I'm on the ramp to go into Mexico. I made a wrong turn. I don't have any intention to go into Mexico. What should I do?" And they say, "Well, come on in and you can turn around and leave." They lied to him, you know. And he said, "I want to tell you, I got guns. You know, I've got these weapons," and he described them. And, you know, come on in, you know. And I don't know how long he stayed in this Mexican prison. Now, I would suggest to you that that is quite a contrast to what happens to people in the United States.
Yeah.
And so I said, let's just solve our immigration problems. We'll adopt Mexico's immigration policy and laws. And that's not really what I want. Right. You know? But immigration policy of the United States should not be for the benefit of the immigrants. It should be for the benefit of the United States. And you know, I hear people that are all for the open borders thing, and anybody should be able to go to any country they want. Well, just think what happens to the United States if we say, all of China, come here tomorrow. You know, how can we deal with that? It can't happen. How can I put this? The most important aspect of being a nation is controlling your borders. And so we need to close that border. Now, I've suggested building 2 fences with some area in between. And if anybody enters the area between the 2 fences, they are immediately machine gunned with a .50 caliber machine gun, and their body is allowed to sit and rot for the buzzards to eat. Now that sounds harsh.
Yes, it does.
Okay, but I want you to think about this. How many people are dying in the drug wars going on the Mexican border? I mean, what has it been, 30,000 in the last 2 years?
Yeah,
if we had that policy and we said, hey, this is the way it's going to be, how many people would go in that fence and get shot? You want me to give you the number? It would be 0. You know that's what's going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, you'd think that would be a good deterrent.
It would. It would solve the problem. And we've got the wherewithal to do it. And you know, from a technological standpoint, there's probably more efficient ways than that. You know, with, I don't know, drones and all kinds of things. But our border is just wide open for Taliban, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, whoever, to just come on across. I don't think we should be allowing unskilled Mexican labor into the United States unless that's what we choose to need, okay? But we really don't need the drug dealers and the Taliban and all these other people coming in. They're coming for one reason and one reason only, to destroy us.
What about I'm going to kind of give a different perspective on the border, not necessarily because I've embraced it and agree with it, but just kind of to kick around some other thoughts. Ron Paul talks about, he implied that by closing off the border, you can trap Americans in America.
Yeah.
And he wasn't for that. He could see that if there was ever a time when Americans needed to flee the country for whatever reason, a fence would keep them in the country. Mm-hmm. So he was against the fence idea because of that. Yeah. Well, he's got kind of a...
I respectfully disagree. And by the way, for all practical purposes, Americans are, with regard to Mexico, pretty... Would you go to Mexico?
Well, it just depends on what happens in the United States.
Well, yeah, but I mean, are you headed for a vacation in Mexico?
Not anytime soon.
I mean, the people that are going there are going to specific locations, Acapulco or whatever, that are protected.
Yeah.
I know it was a few years ago. My son lives in Texas, right on the Rio Grande. And we were planning a vacation, and we were considering going down. You know, I'd love to see those Aztec remains and whatnot. I'm really a history buff.
Yeah.
And we're talking about that, and he said, Dad, he said, you don't want to cross that border. He says, it's dangerous down there. And this is my son, you know, because he lives there. He says, we better vacation in the United States.
Yeah, I spent some time in Matamoros in 1988, and I was a little creeped out, just because I wasn't sure. I knew that I was no longer in the United States, and I knew that I didn't know all the laws in Mexico, but I knew there wasn't a Bill of Rights in Mexico. Maybe there's some kind of equivalency to that there. I don't know, but I knew, oh man, you're not in America anymore. You need to be careful. You know, that's what some. You know, I was in my late teens. I was with some other young people, and it's like, oh man, you know, we need to be careful over here. But then my mother lived in the Brownsville area, right around that area.
Close to where my son lives at McAllen.
McAllen, yeah. So she lived in that area. So we made multiple trips into Mexico on vacations and different things. We went into Progreso, Matamoros, and different places. I'll tell you a funny story. This, you know, you get outside of the United States, and there are cultural differences that are glaringly obvious to Americans, you know. And we get in this taxi cab, and it's a Ford Escort, but it's painted up like a taxi cab, you know. And there are 4 of us and the driver. So there's 5 of us in a Ford Escort.
Okay, that's tight.
So because I'm the
Are they all as big as you?
No, my stepfather's an inch shorter than me, so he was a big man. And then my mother and my wife, and they told me to get in the front seat because you're the tallest. So I was like, well, okay. So move the seat up. So I'm moving the seat up. So my knees are in the dashboard. Everybody's in the back seat, and the taxi cab driver is like, okay, we're going, you know. Immediately, I mean, not even out of the gate yet, he drives that taxi cab, the Ford Escort, rams the guy in front of us. And I'm like, oh gosh. You know, in the United States, if you get in an accident like that, you stop everything.
Yeah.
You call the police. There's a police report.
You share insurance.
There's an insurance deal. You know, we share phone numbers. Well, what happened in I think it was in Matamoros. What happened in Matamoros was the driver shook his fist at the other guy and said something in Spanish, and the guy shook his fist at the other guy and said something in Spanish. Then they both started laughing, and then off we went. You know, and I was like, wow. And then it was like, you know, if the very first part of this journey is crashing into the guy in front of us, what is the rest of this journey going to hold? You know, I was nervous, man. I was like, oh my goodness. No more accidents after that. We made it to where we were going, and I remember, oh man. But Africa was the same way, you know, in Nigeria.
They don't even have traffic laws in Nigeria, do they?
I think they have traffic laws, but they don't have any enforcement of the laws.
Okay.
There are no traffic signals. I forget the number of people that live in Lagos, Nigeria, but it's in the millions. It's the largest, most populous city on the continent of Africa. Is Lagos.
And there's no stop signs.
No stop signs, no traffic lights, nothing. But there is a horn system in place that is 24 hours a day, day and night, of honking the horns. And there are a lot of families that use mopeds for transportation. It was common to see a man, his wife with a baby on her back, and a teenager or a young person on the tank, and another kid in the middle. You know, so you'd have this whole slew of people on a moped.
Oh my.
And the Nigerian people would weld rebar around the front tire for collisions and the rear tire, you know. And then they'd also take off the original horn, and they'd put on a car horn or a truck horn on their moped, so they'd have a little more ooh, ooh, you know, when they wanted to get out into traffic. They'd think, oh man, here comes a big truck. And it's a little guy on a moped with his family, you know. But, man, the horn thing, that was crazy, day and night. And I was, our driver from the airport to the church, our driver had spent a lot of time in Chicago, which I didn't know, you know, until we got almost to the church, and he's like, you guys don't drive like this in the United States, do you? I'm like, nope. No, we don't. He's like, yeah, I know, I spent, you know, so many years in Chicago, and I was like, oh man, I mean, it's like, hit the gas, lock up the brake, hit the gas, lock up the brake. I mean, just constant, and it's, and there are a lot of damaged vehicles,
Yeah.
you know. But anyway, I don't know how we got off on Nigerian driving and all that, but Oh, you were talking about going to Mexico, for a vacation or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a wise thing to do today. Mexico's not a safe place. And so in a sense, you were talking about a fence would lock us in.
Right.
We're almost locked in now by the fact that it's too dangerous to go there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I have done a little research on expatriation. That number of people who are renouncing their U.S. citizenship is an all-time high right now.
Where are they going, do you know?
No. I know there are a lot of wealthy folks that want to avoid paying a tax.
Yeah.
And so what they'll do is they'll find a country in the world that has unfavorable laws toward U.S. jurisdictional tax invasion issues. There are some countries that have shaken hands with the United States tax attorneys and the tax policies and said, we have the same laws you have. If someone comes to our country trying to evade their taxes, we'll let them in. But then there are other countries, and I think Panama might be one of them, that says, if you try to knock on the door of this bank and our citizens have got money in there, we shut it down. You have no jurisdiction here whatsoever. Yeah. You can't touch this. You can't touch these people.
It's my understanding that Ireland has more favorable tax laws than a lot of countries, and that there's a lot of people going to Ireland.
Yeah, I think that is true. I think its corporate tax rate is really low.
Yeah.
And it's courted a lot of businesses, which, I mean, the Irish government's doing on purpose.
Sure, they're not as dumb as our government.
Yeah, they understand that.
I want to go back a little bit. You were talking about the Koreas.
Yeah.
In North Korea, the people, many of them eat grass and bark. Okay. Yeah. In South Korea, let me just give you two names in South Korea that you will recognize. Hyundai and Kia.
Yeah.
Okay. South Korea has become a manufacturing Goliath, and it's booming. Its economy is thriving.
Yeah.
And at one point in history, Korea was really dominated and oppressed by the Japanese. But at this point in history, Korea is mimicking the Japanese in their industrial development and whatnot, and really, to some extent, even challenging the industrial supremacy of Japan.
And I'll tell you what's interesting too is when you look at what the Japanese went through in World War II. I'm not trying to take their side or whatever. I mean, obviously they were part of that war, but to be nuked, you think, man, what worse could happen to a country than to be nuked? You've got, I think Nagasaki and Hiroshima, each bomb that went off instantly killed 75,000 people instantly. And then within a year, I think another 75,000 people were dead in each city from radiation poisoning. And who knows how many others died after that, but you've got, 300,000 just instantly within a year's time gone. They've rebuilt their entire country.
Have you?
I've one of the greatest.
Yeah.
I mean, God,
I have seen
in Japan.
Photographs, and it's an interesting comparison. And it's photographs of Detroit and Nagasaki, before the bombing, and then photographs of Detroit and Nagasaki today. And Nagasaki's doing a whole lot better than Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit is.
I mean, Nagasaki is like a dream city today, and Detroit is just devastated. And all the radiation's gone.
Yeah.
Everything's been rebuilt. It's all new and wonderful and gleaming. And although Japan's economy's got trouble now for the same reasons we do.
Yeah, central bankers.
Yeah, they're deeply in debt, even though they're a mighty exporting nation. And I think that should be a lesson for us, that if you've got a banking system that operates on fractional reserve banking, doesn't matter what else you got going on that's good in your country's it's going to experience all kinds of economic problems, eventually economic destruction.
Yeah, and that makes me think of yesterday, was December 17th, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average had its greatest one-day jump in the entire year, and it seemed to revolve around the comments of our Federal Reserve Chairman, Janet Yellen, who was saying that for the foreseeable future, we're not going to raise interest rates.
Which means easy money, a lot of new money created, more inflation.
Right. And the argument was with the supply of fuel, and I don't know that fuel is even a measurable metric in inflation, actually, because I thought they took food and fuel out.
I think they did take it out.
But anyway, she was saying that because the gas prices have come down, it's a real good indicator that it's going to balance out inflational pressures. But they said, too, on the news that for the first time since the Fed has been keeping interest rates at zero, there were actually 2 dissenters in the group that made the final decision. I don't know if it's I don't know how the Fed's inner board.
Well, there's a board, and they vote on it.
Yeah, but 2 said no, we need to raise rates. So I don't know if that's just, rhetoric or propaganda, or if it was actually there are members of the Fed that are like, hey, we need to start raising rates, or we're going to see some serious inflation.
Well, I think something that a lot of people are confused on is many people think that inflation is rising prices.
Right.
And that's not what inflation is.
That's right.
Inflation is an increase in the money supply.
Right.
And when you increase money supply, prices go up.
Right.
But let's don't put the cart before the horse here. It's inflation is expanding or inflating the money supply. And that's what we're doing. And
right.
it's so important that we understand this. When you do that, you are stealing from anyone that has savings. That's because all money is created by being loaned into existence at interest. And when the banking system creates all money has to be paid back to the banking system plus interest. You cannot pay the only money creator more money than it has created.
That's exactly right.
All you can do is keep going back and borrowing more. Right. And expanding. The money supply has to constantly expand. Now, that constantly destroys the savings of anybody that's got savings. And at the same time, it constantly lays debt on future generations.
And it constantly forces people to run on that treadmill of performance, because if they stop running, they move into that saving category, and now they're whittling away, the inflation will whittle away at their purchasing power of those dollars that they've saved.
Absolutely.
And it's really cooked into the books, too, to force people, somebody's going to have to file bankruptcy.
Yeah. And right now, it's looking like the federal government may be a likely candidate. And I've just looked, and we are out of time.
Yeah, I've got about an hour here logged in.